Are we live? I think we are actually live. Very, very good. Few technical snafus to work out this morning. A very bright good morning to you all, by the way. I have attempted what Georgia Liberty suggested to me on one of her recent live streams about making the live chat appear automatically on the screen. I don't know if it's actually cooperating with me, so let me know. The only way you can let me know is just to do a little shout out, say hi, let me know you are here. If it appears on the screen, then I will know. If a couple minutes go by, then I'll just assume that this attempted theme overlay didn't happen to work this morning because, why have things work properly on a Monday? That's not what Mondays are for. But happier note, it is March. And I don't know about you, but in my area, March has wandered into us like a lamb. We have a lot of sunshiny skies, as you can tell. We have really warm, beautiful breezes going on. I did shut the window just in this room because I didn't want any of that nasty wind interference to come through the microphone. I mean, we have enough issues with cars driving by on the road and cats crashing around. The kittens, by the way, have been extremely active and very destructive right now. So if you hear any random crashes through the live stream, it's the babies. I'm sorry. It's just what they're doing right now. They'll settle down once they're older. But of course, because March is coming in so politely, like that lamb, it will absolutely be legally obliged to go out like the lion. So I'm feeling a little dubious as the month shapes up. But the good news is that if in your neck of the woods it's actually doing the reverse and it started out real rough, maybe as the month goes on, you will have brighter, warmer, happier days to look forward to. Whereas I'm probably going to see daffodils peeking up through the snows. But it's Missouri. What else is new? So, why are we here today, my darlings? Well, we are here because it is Ostara season. So that means we're focused on renewal. We are focused on balance. We are focused upon the resurgence of the light. What could be better? It's a nice change of pace from everything that's been going on throughout, the winter season and just the general sense of doom and gloom that we've had with us for a little while yet. Not super fun. Most years, I really like the winter. I like how subdued it is. I like being lost in my own daydream world the way winter allows us to do. But that was just not my experience this year. So I'm just bring on the warmth, bring on the light, bring on all of the pretty flowers because I desperately need it. Maybe it's just because of the situation that our society as a whole is in that I'm just needing something a little more uplifting. Perhaps you're in the same boat. But with the idea of renewal, I do want to play into the idea of we need to have renewal on multiple levels of our existence. It isn't just the renewal of the land, coming out of the sleep of winter and having the resurgence of new life, both in the plant and in the animal world. As important as that is, as necessary as that is. But what about the renewal of the spirit, the renewal of the mind, the renewal of the heart? We may have had our energy turning very much inwards for the past couple of months, but where are we coming out of it? Are we ready to, peel back the curtains from our soul, look out through the window of our eyes and decide to actually re-engage with the world because this is what the season is all about. We have been cooped up and now it's time to move on to something different. And the idea of balance has really never been more important, has it? At least not in my living memory. Everything in the world is out of balance. We have governments that are out of balance with their own people. The people vote and say, I want you to do XYZ, politician. And of course, the politicians wander off. And it's not only that they don't do what they say they're going to do, it's not just that they're not listening to us, which is egregious in and of itself, but it's the idea that politicians are objectively, demonstrably acting against the interests of their own constituents. And this is just the way that it has been for the past couple of years. And that ugly reality has gotten more obvious and more naked with every passing day. That's a lot to deal with because that's not the proper condition of the world. Now, is it? Things should be in much better balance. And then, what about the balance of just how we conduct ourselves through life? What about the balance between ourselves and all of this technology and the gadgets and gizmos that we have every single day? I submit that I do think that the verdict is in, that these things aren't really healthy for us, at least not the way we are constructing our lives around our technology in this present moment. All of it seems to be trying to push people into abandoning the physical world, ignoring what is around you in favor of something that's far away, something that you can't see without a camera lens, something you can't touch immediately, something you can't feel and experience for yourself, but you're supposed to be contented and make do with this more digital existence. And also, this goes along with some of the criticisms that often gets thrown at the younger generation. And I mean, yes, they can and should, and they do deserve to be criticized in many respects. But what I think is empty from that conversation, and I think needs to be brought forward a lot more, is just what are their factory settings compared with the factory settings of the older generations. Now, my own generation, I'm an elder millennial, 1981. That's when I came into this world. But think about it, that wasn't just pre-social media, that was pre-internet. That was just not a thing growing up. So all of my childhood, halfway through my adolescence, it was just this tactile, what's around you is around you world. And if you want to find out about something else that's going on, well, you have to wait for a documentary, or you have to watch the news, or you have to read books. There was a little bit more involved if you actually wanted to be engaged in what was beyond your sphere. But your immediate sphere was always understood to be these are your closest concerns. Before you worry about what's going on halfway around the world, why don't you start focusing on the people around you if you want to improve something? And then and I think that, when we are removed from our technology, people of my generation who do not just that weren't just born in this pre-internet era, but who lived it, who have living, breathing, active memories of this time period. When you take us away from the social media and all of the technology, I think a lot of us find it very restful, and our old programming from those days, those analog days, it resurfaces. We understand how to live and how to exist in such circumstances. And to a similar but somewhat lesser degree, so do the people who can remember the time before social media was as big as what it is now. They still have some of that program, even though they it would be still much more difficult to separate them from the internet than it would be for someone like me of my age. But they still understand, there's are times when you are connected with what's going on in the digital space, and then there's the rest of your life, which is your real life, and that's what you actually attend to. But for people who were really born, on this side of 9/11, especially for people who were born on this side of when social media exploded, they have no understanding, let alone recollection of what the world was before. So when they're encouraged to go out and touch grass, for example, or to engage in some more traditional behaviors or anything of that sort, anything that takes them out of, being focused on their phones and on their screens and all concerned with that, anything outside of that, they have no backup programming for. They can't remember because they never experienced it. It has not been part of their reality. So, as older generations are perhaps critiquing or probably more constructively providing guidance, I think that's important for us to remember. I think it's important for us to understand and come to grips with the world that the children are actually dealing with, because the world they're dealing with is not at all the same world that we grew up in. And I think by acknowledging that, we'll be able to come into a better balance of relationships between the generations, but also and actually doing what was never really done for us, being helpful guides and counselors as they are navigating through those steps of life. Another aspect of life that we might be in need of balancing at this time is if we are entering a new chapter. Uh, I was thinking a lot, just because I'm 42, so the specter of menopause does loom large in my mind. For the average woman, 51, 52, that's when that really gets going. So I've been doing research and trying to prepare, because as much information is available to prefer to teach girls about what to expect as they go into adolescence, and the wisdom of older generations of what they might experience as regards to what's going on with their bodies, what's going on with them psychologically, how this is preparing them for womanhood. We have a lot of that down. We understand that. We can communicate that to them. And we can even communicate to them the changes they can expect if they get married, if they have children, all these other things. But that crash at the end and the years leading up to the actual menopause, when you start having all sorts of interesting and very undignified symptoms, that's not something that gets discussed as much. And it's not only that there isn't as much good medical information, there is some, I have found some. However, I will say that I think a lot of it is written with the intent of frightening women and persuading them that their solution must be surely if they just take a pill or take some kind of hormones, that that would be the answer they're looking for. Not as much emphasis on changes of exercise, diet, or just how you can adjust your own thought process to bring yourself into better alignment with the phase of life you're entering into. Not so much of that. But also, what I have found disappointing and concerning is that even within the pagan sphere, I'm not seeing as much written about this transitional period of going from the phase of mother and going into the period of cronehood. I've seen lots of rituals that celebrate and acknowledge becoming that crone, and that's great. That's wonderful. I'm glad those things exist. But the lead up to it, the preparation phase, I haven't found as much about that, and I think we need that. And I think that that is another aspect of coming into balance. And for men, they go through their own rites of passage when as they go through the ages as well. It's not generally as centered around the reproductive process because that's not the reality that Mother Nature saw fit to give them. But still, they go through their own psychological changes. And for a lot of generations, mine and all those going forward, I feel like a lot of us are suffering from a kind of arrested development. So many of us feel like life never really got started. And suddenly, what do you mean? It's halfway through. What do you mean? I need to start thinking about the old age to come. I think we are going to need a little bit of help. I think we're going to need some companionship along with this journey as we just kind of muddle our way through. And hopefully, we'll find balance within ourselves, and that will help us be useful to provide guidance for the generations that come after us. So that's also in line with this theme of Ostara. As much as Ostara is focusing on new life and fertility and everything else, we also have that opposite end of it. What happens when fertility fades? What is it? What happens when you realize that one chapter of your life is over and it's time to pass that torch and hand over their responsibilities to the next generation? Psychologically scary stuff, but important stuff. And of course, it all has spiritual meaning. Now, the other major theme of the star is, of course, the return of the light. Now, ever since the solstice, the sun, of course, has been gaining in strength a little bit every day. And then by the time Amalt comes around, we're really starting to notice a difference. And then Ostara is that glorious moment where we have, the equal measures of the light and the dark. And then from going on forward, we have many more daylight hours than we do nighttime hours, which is why I personally choose Ostara as one of my marking points for the light half of the year. For me, it's from equinox to equinox. And people have different rationales for how they view it in their own practices. And I'm not saying anyone needs to adopt mine. But for me, it always makes sense to think that the light half of the year is the period of time where there is more light than there is nighttime. That just is the more intuitive thing for me. But if you go solstice to solstice, or, from Imalk to Lanasa or Beltane to Samhain, there's nothing wrong with that. What really is significant is that you're making use of those seasonal energies and attempting to understand them. That's what matters, not not petty discussions about the demarcations. Stara, which of course, for those who are not aware, I want to go over a little bit of basic information. For the old hands, go ahead, make yourself a cup of tea. This will be brief though. But for those who aren't aware, Ostara is a celebration of the vernal or the spring equinox. Again, it is that moment of that balancing between the light time and the dark time. And then it's also a balance between the masculine and feminine energies, or the projective and receptive energies, if you prefer to think of it that way. Uh, a lot of what we call feminine or receptive energy, it's all about energy that envelops, and that's very much what the dark half of the year does. It envelops you, it cloaks you in that dark where you aren't getting as much light to come through. It isn't a time really of growth, it's a time of of resting. It's a time of gestation. It's just letting things be and going through that process. Whereas when you get into the light half of the year, and of course the warm half of the year, it's more like, let's get up, let's go out there, let's do something, let's go forth and conquer. And that's the projective energy or the masculine energy. And we start seeing this more of those energies not completely having dominance over each other, but working more so in partnership with each other. So that's a good point of reflection for us as we go forward through the year of thinking about, are we in balance with our counterpart? Are we in balance with our marriage mate? Are we making sure that we're working together as a team? Because Ostara and then Mabon, these are good times to just take a little bit closer look at that and just be honest with ourselves about what we find, and of course make adjustments. And then, of course, Ostara is also the feast for the goddess Ostara, and it represents fertility, new life, hope, all the great, wonderful stuff, as we know. Now then, it is coming early this year. Ostara will be April 19th, 2024. That's a really early Ostara. And also coincidentally, it's also going to be a very early Easter this year as well. So if you have relatives who are Christian or just secular people who celebrate Easter, because let's admit, from a lot of people who aren't religious, Easter's about, chocolate candy, baby ducks, sending the kids out on egg hunts, things of that nature. I would encourage you, you don't have to obviously participate in any Easter religious celebrations, but if grandma wants you to come home and have Easter dinner with the family, I think that's a graceful thing to do. I don't think that jeopardizes your pagan practice. It's just to attend a family gathering for a holiday that is one of those holidays that I think is just as much cultural as it is religious anymore. But I want to take us through the astrology we can expect on that day. Of course, on the equinoxes, we will have the sun leaving one sign and entering another. In this case, it is Pisces, that mutable water sign representing a lot of compassion, and it slides over into Aries, a cardinal fire sign representing courage. And this will occur pretty late in the evening, 10:06 p.m. Central Time. So we're going from, again, that very watery, that receptive, that feminine energy, that very emotional, compassionate energy. And then we're doing a great big switcheroo. It's of that valiant, sally forth and conquer. I'm going to face whatever needs to be faced. I shall overcome whatever I need to overcome. That is the Aries. And it's not a reflective sign at all. It's just, this is what I need to do. This is the path that I've chosen to do it, and woe betide anything that gets in my way. So that's a good jump start of us. We can use that, to really get our gardens going, to really tackle that spring cleaning if we haven't done it already, and just to take on other projects that we've had in our life that we haven't made as much progress as what we would hope. I mean, this is a good time to reflect upon our New Year's resolutions because, again, this is kind of this was one of the traditional pagan New Year times, the vernal equinox, which makes sense because New Year, New Spring, all ties in very well together. Perhaps one day we'll have a calendar again that does mark it that way. I mean, we'll have to see. Um, but still, it is that new beginning, and it's about attacking it with full gusto. So we can make use of that. Now, the moon will be in the second quarter of Cancer, a cardinal water sign. It's a very sensitive kind of placement. So expect emotions to be, a lot closer to the surface and perhaps a lot louder during that particular part of the day. Then it goes void of course, which means it's transitioning between signs at 1:52 p.m. Central Time, and then it will enter second quarter Leo, which makes me very happy because my son's sign is Leo, so I'm always comfortable when we start having more Leo placements. But Leo is a fixed fire sign, and it represents enthusiasm, and it'll make that transition at 2:33 p.m. Central Time. Now, the lovely thing about the sun moving into a fire sign and then the moon being in a fire sign is that you have all of this wonderful get up and let's go energy. And then we see that in Mercury, it's continuing this trend. It'll be in Aries, again, cardinal fire. And when it's in Mercury, it represents alertness, particularly with communication. You aren't just being able to say what you need to say in a direct and a concise manner, but you're also picking up on cues from other people. Even though Aries isn't exactly a sign known for listening, it is a sign for noticing strategically important information. So you might not necessarily be listening to people in a deep way on this day, but you will be picking up on some important info that you need to know. So that will also help. Foster your ability to get things done. Venus, by contrast, will be in Pisces on that day, which is a mutable water sign, represents compassion, and I think this will help smooth over any dealings we have with our loved ones if, we're getting a bit brash or a little bit too mission focused on Ostara and in the coming days. The Venus being in Pisces, it comes back and reminds us that, hey, there's these other people in your life and you care about them. Maybe you could be a little less brusque, a little less mission focused, and remember there are people around you. So we do have that going for us. Mars, which again is a very aggressive sign, it will be in Aquarius fixed air. It's a very staid kind of energy, which I've covered in the daily forecast before now about how that is really counterintuitive. But that is the information that I have found, and it was conveyed to me by people with wiser heads than I have when it comes to us. Astrology. So the nice thing about this particular placement is I think it will help balance out any excesses uh, that we might have uh, that could be provoked through the sun and the moon and the Mercury sign. This will help tone things down just a smidge. Jupiter, of course, will remain in Taurus that day. Fixed Earth sign, very practical. I think Jupiter and Mars will really help us. It will help us not get inside of our own way and getting too run away with whatever we're doing. Then Saturn is in Pisces, mutable water sign, representing nostalgia. And then Uranus will stay in Taurus, a fixed Earth sign. That's all about renovation, which again, that will be very helpful for the sun and moon placements. Neptune will be in Pisces, mutable water, imaginative. I think that'll play off nicely with Venus and Saturn. Help keep us grounded, help keep us remember that we are not the only person in the world, which all of the fire sign energy can sometimes get us in trouble with. And then Pluto will be in Aquarius, a fixed air sign, all about reformation. So we've got really good astrological climate for Ostara itself. If you want to get something done, this is the day to really set things in motion, including your magical intentions. And then from there on out, make sure that your magical and your mundane and actions are in alignment and going in the same direction, and that you're not sending mixed signals to the universe. Now, next up, another note about the energy of the day is that Astara will take place on a Tuesday, which of course we know that is the day of Mars, and it's dedicated to not just Mars, but Aries, his counterpart in the Greek pantheon, and of course Tyr, and who is in the Norse. So this just infuses the day with very proactive, zealous, and determined energies. So, as the sun will again be moving into Aries, that cardinal fire sign, that's just reinforcing the exuberance and the productive energies. The moon also will be adding another layer into this mix because it will be in a state of waxing. So, it is gaining in strength. So, perfect for planting, magical intentions, anything that you want to have grow. Star is just going to be an absolute knockout day for it. So let's talk about a few associations with Astara. We have all kinds of helpful charts and cheat sheets when it comes to Astara correspondences. One of the consistencies is, of course, those pastel colors. We so frequently see not only in nature but also in a lot of the Easter decor, and it's because we are just going into the very beginning of the growth season, so everything's just a bit lighter. It's got a lot of white infused with it, barely there colors that eventually will give way to the much brighter colors that we're accustomed to seeing in the summer. So think spring greens when it comes to your decor or anything else that you're doing with star related. The spring green can represent fertility, the light blue tranquility, pink for healing, violet for magic, yellow for vitality, white for innocence. You can weave in some silver for the goddess and for any spring goddesses, and white gold for the god and other spring gods. So this is an important thing. You can use color as a language for your altar, which you've seen a lot of the colors mentioned in my backdrop right here, but also using this not only with your decor, but even how you might compose your feast, how you choose to dress for your ritual, a variety of things. If you can kind of keep everything focused and centered on this particular color scheme, you can make good use of those energies because even color itself has a lot of energy for us to play with. Next up, we have the flowers. And oh, I found us a pretty array. So daffodils, I always see daffodils first in Missouri, followed by usually hyacinths and grape hyacinths. I have some volunteer daffodils and some volunteer grape hyacinths in the yard where I live right now, and they're just lovely. It is a complete treat. They break out the doldrums from winter, and I always look forward to them. Also, crocuses are common in a lot of different places, and occasionally by Ostara. This doesn't always happen where I live, but if we're really lucky, some years we actually get our first tulips, and they're so pretty. I've always loved tulips, they're such a pretty shape. But these are the flowers that I'm really focusing on and that I'm hoping to make use of if they see fit to appear around me, just because this is what's local to me. The real question is what flowers are in bloom and plentiful locally to where you live, because anything that's in bloom during Ostar itself, where you live, is completely appropriate to use on your altar, on your tablescape for your feast, to make use of them magically. What is around you is really going to determine what is corresponding to this particular day. And this is another reason why, here's my little nag about why it's important to cultivate a more localized uh, practice. Work with the energies around you, see how they tie in with this established custom, and then you're going to find something that is a lot more true and a lot more potent and powerful, magically speaking and spiritually speaking, for you where you live. Next up, also look out for trees, shrubs that might be budding out. Try to identify what they are. If you're in the market to plant them, you might want to have a specimen tree or shrub or two. That way, when you are coming out of winter, it'll be that little ray of hope. There's nothing like having a forsythia, which is what the yellow one is, and the pink tree down below, that's a red bud. I really love both of those, but I really look forward to the forsythia. There's a lot of forsythia in Missouri. We even have a wild variant on the cultivated forsythia that also comes out at this time of year. So wherever you are, whether you're driving through town and you notice, some things that happen to be in people's gardens, or if you're driving through the country back rural roads, you are bound to see some sort of forsythia, and it's yellow and it's bursting forth, and it's just a relief to the eye. Now, next up, crystals associated with Ostara. And you'll notice again, we are following through with that same color scheme, all of these lovely pastels. Some of these a bit darker than the pastels, but you can see they would all be on the same paint chip. Rose quartz is wonderful for Ostara, bringing up that very loving, very affectionate energy. Citrine for all of your intentions having to do with the sun itself, or bringing back the life, bringing back the source of life, having bursts of energy so you can do what you need to do. Citrine is just so lovely. Green agate for growth and for grounding. I really love agates for that. They are marvelous. Aquamarine. Again, it's that pale blue, and it gives you a sense of tranquility and calm. And if you have been struggling with anxiety or any kind of seasonal depression, doing some meditations with aquamarine can be very helpful to you. Then we have amethyst, that lovely violet, that catalyst of magic, and also very good for sleep and for dream work and things of that sort. So if you are wanting to do dream work on Astara, which Tuesdays aren't always, I would say, the most conducive days, but again, it's a holy day, so I think you have a little bit more chance of success than you would just a run of the mill Tuesday. Put some amethyst beneath your pillow, and you can have some Astara dreams and maybe some prophetic dreams, which are very useful. And then, of course, we have moonstone, that white, but not just white. We have this kind of soft iridescence on some varieties of moonstone that are picking up on those soft, subtle rainbow colors of the very early spring. And you can use crystals for almost anything. Altar around the house, incorporate them into your spells, put them into your rituals, use them, meditate with them, apply them to dream work. You are really limited only in your imagination with how you make use of this particular tool. All right, next up, animals and a sip of tea. Okay, so our animals for this time of year, obviously, bees. We've got to have bees for all of that fertility. Oh, and hello, Wiccan Conservative. A very good morning to you. Oh, I went through the themes and I tried making the text appear like you suggested it would, but for some reason it's not letting me save the theme. And so I'm not able to yet get, the comments scrolling the way that I want to, but never fear, I'm on the right track. The technology will yield to my will eventually. But glad you're here. Glad you're here. We're going through a little bit of correspondences. Of course, bees, for obvious reasons, we've got to have them going around pollinating and fertilizing various flowers. Otherwise, we're not going to have much in the way of harvest or any kind of seasonal beauty. Another emergent animal at this time of year, at least where I live, are snakes. And I incorporated a picture of a garter snake because, for one, I find if we're going to be showing pictures of snakes, the non venomous varieties seem to be easier to cope with than the venomous. Even though the picture can't hurt us, it still can send the brain into a tailspin. Let's just be honest with that. But also, they tend to be, if I'm going to encounter a snake in the early spring, I will tend to see a some form of garter snake first. So that's why that got that place of honor there. And of course, this is also that time of year where everything is emerging. And if it's warm enough for the reptiles to emerge from their hibernative state, that we can start getting moving with our gardens and with everything else and starting to re-embrace the outdoor life and being outside and not being cooped up anymore, because if the cold-blooded reptiles can do it, then it's safe for the mammals. Another animal association, of course, are butterflies. We will start seeing them. They also have a helpful role to play with flowers. And then, the cute baby chicks. It just would not be Ostara without our adorable baby chicks and, these little symbols of new life, or without the rabbits, because I can't really think of an animal that represents the idea and the reality of fertility more than rabbits. There's a reason why breed like rabbits it became the expression that it is. It is very, very literal. It's one of the reasons why people who raise rabbits for meat, why it is such a sustainable, ongoing source of nourishment for them. Personally, that's not my thing. They're too cute, cuddly, fuzzy. They're too much like cats. And because I am a crazy cat lady, I don't think I could go there with rabbits, but I do like having them around, and it's nice to see them come back in the spring. And of course, the traditional herald of all spring is the robin. I have already seen my first robin, but I haven't really seen more than a few here and there, so I'm still waiting for robins as a whole to come back. But then again, on the other hand, there are a lot of stray cats in the neighborhood, so the robins might be here, but it doesn't mean the cats are letting them live long enough for me to notice them. There's that. Oh, and George is talking again. She says, "Don't worry to read out loud." Yeah, I learned apparently you have to save the theme. It's difficult to explain, except that once you're on the first screen with the default theme and the one you, oh yeah, with the text scroll. Yeah, Ugh. You would think that by now the people who make programs would realize that those of us who aren't in their world, we're a little bit dumb, and what's normal and intuitive for them, it does not follow that it's intuitive for the rest of us, and it's just frustrating when things are not as simple as possible. I need the dumb version of everything. I'm not even ashamed to admit it. Technology's hard. I don't like it. All right, so now for the feast. Let's talk about our menus because we should be planning our menus now. I found that if I know what I'm doing ahead of time, that I'm not going to be in a panic. I'm not going to have to do any last minute assembly. Things can be budgeted in properly for a more celebratory dinner. Life just seems to work a lot better when we plan ahead. So I was thinking for Ostara, main course, some form of ham. It's just my husband and I, so we'll probably do ham steaks rather than a full ham. So it really just depends upon, how many people are in your household, how many people do you got to feed. But the reason why I chose ham, which of course comes from pigs, is just because of pigs' association with abundance and fertility. Rolls, because not only is that a staple for dinners everywhere, but what is it made from? It's made from wheat, this life-sustaining thing. Then scalloped potatoes. I just think in general, scalloped potatoes are a nice companion to ham, but potatoes also, is even though they're, things like potatoes and starches and rolls with their carbohydrates. These are not things that make people skinny or fit. However, for our ancestors, when they lived in much more perilous times, these were things that actually kept people from starving to death. So uh, l- as long as we eat things in moderation, we're usually pretty okay. Then I chose for the green asparagus. I've recently developed a taste for asparagus, and it's one of the first vegetables that tends to be available where I live. So I thought asparagus would be a good choice. And again, for your own celebratory dinner, what seasonal ingredients do you have available for you? Because it's a way of integrating what you have with your pre-existing social, spiritual practice. Help! I need more tea, gang. My gods. Okay, so for drinky drinks, I always like to have a bit of wine on these occasions. I would think white wine because you actually do pair white wine with ham if you're doing things properly. But also because that little tinge within the white wine, that's a little bit of yellow, it does remind me a little bit of the returning rays of the sunlight, and it tends to be a lighter type of wine, even if you get the more dry varieties. And it feels seasonally appropriate. And then for dessert, I greatly recommend carrot cake with the cream cheese frosting and the yummy yums. There's so many different ways you can make it pretty. And the carrot, that brings to mind, the association with rabbits, and it's just nice at this time of year. And if you are actually going to go to one of your relatives for Easter Sunday because they like to get the family together, and you are tasked with baking the dessert, well, if you've already had practice for Ostara making the carrot cake, you might feel more confident bringing that to the rest of your relatives. Oh, and going back to the subject of wine, Georgia Liberty says that a good dry Chardonnay for her. Absolutely, I can accommodate you. I am developing my wine cellar, so I got you. We could make that happen. All right. Next up, we have activities because it is, of course, all about the doing. We have the fun stuff, the dyeing of the eggs. I've seen some people do some really pretty dyed eggs using just natural dyes. So if you want to do that, you can do that and still have a really pretty display. It's a good time to start or to plant the seedlings of various plants. We want to have good harvest. We want to make things happen. And even if you don't have a particularly big space and you can't do a lot of major gardening, maybe you could have, a pot of some herbs. No matter how small it is, just participating in this process of growing things, it'll bring you more in tune with those spiritual energies. It'll help you understand the process a little bit more. And I've even heard people sometimes suggest choosing a particular plant that you use as a focus for your own meditations. Now, at present, my aloe vera plant is, a little cross from the winter, so I don't know if I'll use that for a focus of meditation, but I could, and who knows? Maybe that exchange of energy would actually help that poor plant recover. And then, crafting decorations for Ostara. I like to do those ahead of time, but if you want to make that a fun project with your kids or your grandkids, if you have them, there's all sorts of fun things you can do. I chose this picture that I found on Pinterest. It was of a beautiful painting, and it has, our pentacle, and it has the pretty flowers and the adorable little bunny. It's all seasonally appropriate and lovely. I was also looking at it and I'm thinking, oh gosh, I just want to make that an embroidery pattern. Wouldn't that be gorgeous? If you have any kind of crafty skill, try to incorporate that and bring that to all of your Sabbat decorations. Bring it to your altar. Just help add that to the atmosphere of your home. The more you put energy into your surroundings, the more you will have that oasis of comfort that, I think pretty much all of us need right now. Other activities are performing house cleansings and blessings, particularly if you're able to have the windows wide open, if you have a good strong breeze, getting that air just to sweep away any stagnant energies. Amazing stuff. Perfect time of year to do it. Now, if your weather just is not conducive for that, let's say that it's Ostara and where you live, it happens to be snowing. That has happened to me on many occasions. Very sad. Probably not the day to open up the windows, but if you do that, just do it briefly, do your work, and don't freeze to death. Don't do that. But Star is also a good time to be performing some protection magic for pets and for livestock because again, this is a vulnerable time of year, particularly if you are breeding animals of any kind. They do need that extra bit of protection. They're going to be very focused on their young for a little while, so just make sure they're okay. Both mundane and magic working together always gets better results than if you use just one. This is also the day of all days to perform a land blessing in hopes of a good harvest. Make some offerings to any land spirits or deities that have to do with agriculture that you work with. This is the time. And of course, in your ritual, make room for celebrating the goddess Ostara herself. Whether because there is some controversy as regards the identity of Ostara, I fall into the camp of saying that I really think she's just the Germanic version of Yidun. That we're familiar with from Norse mythology. Other people completely disagree, which is fine. However, whether you see Ostara as an independent being of herself or just a title that is sometimes used to refer to goddesses of spring, either way, make some space to honor her. Then again, feast with friends and family, sing songs, play games, and you might do a little bit of personal wishing magic for the growing season itself. Maybe you're working on some aspect of self growth. Again, how are those New Year's resolutions going? Did you do anything to follow through with them? If you hadn't, that's okay. Make a star a new starting point for you. Everything up until now has been troubleshooting. That's how I like to think of it. It's one thing to have a goal, but it's quite another thing to have a productive method for attaining that goal. So if the methods you have been using to get your goals have not been universally successful thus far, that's okay. It is not the end of the world. Just try another method. A star is a good time for that. Oh, and Georgia's chiming in. She says, take a moment to breathe in fresh air of spring. My God, that is so true. And, after I get off this live stream, I'm opening up the window in this room back up again. I want to breathe in all of that beautiful fresh air. This just something, the air feels different at this time of year. You know what I mean? It is the freshness, but it's also just something about it is just so different. It is communicating a different message. It's not saying hunker down. It's not saying brace for impact, unless we have a tornado. But it's giving a very different kind of feeling. It's wake up, get up, let's do things. Oh, speaking of which, if you would like to share kind of a nice children's story with your children, that's not pagan in of itself, but is very pagan adjacent in its thinking. This would be a good time of year to get out The Wind in the Willows book. When the book begins, you have the character of Mole. He's engaged in spring cleaning, and that led him to that agitated not anxious, but that agitated energy. It got him out of his whole house where he was living and exploring the broader world. And that's where he meets new friends and goes on all kinds of adventures. There's a lot about the worldview of that book that is very compatible with a pagan worldview. So if you're looking for age appropriate stories to share with your kids, that's one I would highly recommend. And Georgia is saying, going back to the discussion about the air, about how cleansing the air is, lots of life on the senses. It's just the air this time of year is marvelous. If you're in the city, try to at least get out a little bit. So the last activity I really want to emphasize is the importance of arranging your altar. Get seasonal items, make it beautiful to your eyes. If not into the color palette for this time of year, work with what is actually speaking to you. And of course, look at what is actually around you. In every season, there's its own rainbow of color, even in the wintertime. Maybe in the future I'll actually go into that in greater depth. Okay, put that in the mental back burner. We'll talk about that later. But look at what is the rainbow color around you right now. What energies are you really tapping into? You may be, perhaps coming out of some struggles with seasonal depression, and you might be thinking, yellow is the only color that exists right now. If I cannot have the sun every single day, maybe you've been having some rain. I will make the sun. I will have daffodils. I will paint the walls yellow. I will do what I have to do. Whatever it is that you need, that's the color to incorporate into your altar. Whatever symbols are meaning something to you. If there are, little wild critters that are coming back right now, I've been seeing lots of birds and squirrels. Maybe having a representation of that on your altar. Make it personal to you. Customize it to your environment. And that's what I have for you today. Make it yours. Make these holidays your own. And not only will you feel more in tune with the season, which means you'll be making better use of those magical energies, You'll also be allowing the spiritual lessons that are just multi-layered within these occasions sink in a lot more. You'll be able to digest them a lot more. And of course, you'll feel more connected to any of the deities that have such a strong presence at this time of year. That is what I've got for you guys today. The rest of the week, I'm going to be working on making the daily forecast videos for next week, as well as the pagan lens, the Havamal, the next Wicca class. It's taking me a lot longer to get the daily forecast videos up and roughing since I've changed the format and I'm actually appearing on camera for them. So I'm not as ahead as I ordinarily am, but on the other hand, that benefit means is that I'm much more in the flow of the now. Yeah, I'm not sitting here in early March and worrying about what's going on in late May. So there's a benefit to that. But again, it means my time management is a little bit different than what it was earlier this year. Another thing I'm going to be working on is I'm going to be working on a review for the Netflix version of Avatar: The Last Airbender. I have waited this long because I wanted to watch through the series several times. I've watched through it twice now. The third time I'm going to be taking notes, bringing so I make sure that I don't forget things that I want to bring up. But also, it gives an opportunity for people who are reaction channels to go ahead. Unload their ammunition and whatever they're going to say for good and ill. I have not watched any reaction videos. I don't care about their opinions. I don't want to hear about it. It was bad enough. Every time I see a reaction video, no matter if I like the title or not, I hide it on my timeline on YouTube because I don't want to have other people's ideas seep into my own personal reaction. And also, I'm looking at Avatar: Last Airbender a little bit differently than your casual viewer. For one, I'm pagan, and I'm looking at it from that more pagan's perspective because having this world built around the various manifestations of the elements and having these much more immediate powers associated with them. I think that's again, it's one of those stories. It's not a pagan story, but it is pagan adjacent. It's very friendly to the pagan worldview. So I'm looking at it through that. And also, unlike a lot of the reactors who they were watching the cartoon version of Avatar: The Last Airbender, when they were children, 7, 8, 9 years old, I was introduced to it when I was an adult, fell in love with the story. Whenever I'm having really hard days, it's one of those nice, sweet, innocent, wholesome series that I go back and I give them another watch. And I always loved it, but I didn't come to it as the way that I would Star Wars, because Star Wars is what I was watching when I was very little, along with Doctor Who and Star Trek and various British detective stories. So I'm not looking at it with the same kind of nostalgia as some of the other reactors. And also, I avoided rewatching the series before I watched the live action version. I wanted to have completely fresh eyes so much as possible. I wanted to have an open mind, and more importantly, an open heart with as few preconceptions as possible, because I think that gets in the way of a lot of analysis. Because again, if you have a reactor who watched this during their childhood and now they're watching the Netflix series as an adult, they might have gone into it with some preconceived ideas for how they think it ought to have been done. So anything that deviates from that is going to be a bit jarring for them. And I think that gets in the way of being able to properly digest these particular stories. And that's what I want to do. I want to give it a clean read, a clean reaction, as much as what's humanly possible. So I'm going to be working on that. I'm hoping to have that ready for next week. We'll just have to see. I've got a lot of pie plates spinning in the air right now. And of course, have good news on the house front. The farmhouse my husband and I have been working on for forever. Yeah, we were making great progress, and then we had that car strike of the auto workers union during the fall, so that made the money a little bit tight, and that slowed our progress, which neither of us are any too pleased about. But we're getting some things formulated. We're getting things underway, and so we hope to have more progress with that going forward. So again, that'll be another constraint on my time. So we'll just see how things go. We're going to be playing things very much by ear this year. and just making room for any necessary transitions that have to happen. This channel is definitely not a stagnant channel. Sometimes I change it just because I need to refresh. Sometimes I change things up because I can see that the things I'm talking about aren't necessarily what's on people's minds and hearts at a particular moment. So trying to adjust for that in the audience. There's all sorts of reasons why you see changes on the channel occur, sometimes without any warning. But that's just another level that could be going on. So you're aware of that. And I think I've taken up enough of your time on this Monday morning. I hope you have a really good rest of your day. I will see you guys when I see you. And of course, like, subscribe, leave me comments. I am nothing without feedback. So have a good one. Bye bye.